today I'm joined by David Bryson from Uniper. David, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Kelvin.
To discuss COP26, its outcomes and what next. Were you disappointed or encouraged by the final results of COP?
Well, first of all, I was fortunate enough to be there, but not actually in the Congress itself, in one of the hubs. And I have to say the atmosphere was really positive, super positive, in fact. I think like everybody, and I think most people probably felt disappointed at the end because, we were hoping for a bit more maybe in terms of coal.
So you were optimistic going into it?
I was optimistic going into it. And I think, like most people, I felt disappointed. But then, when you stop and you look back at it, as I've done since, I think it was a positive step forwards. Now, we're on a journey, I think. We all recognise that. This is the first time I think the Paris rules have been adopted. So that's a very positive step. Clearly, the US and China coming together, I think, account for about 45% of emissions. Them agreeing to something in that pressure cooker, if you like, of COP was also a significant step forwards. Would I have liked more? And like other people, probably yes. But I think overall we should be positive and optimistic about what happened.
So was there anything you were disappointed by?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a shame that they couldn't get the agreement on coal that they wanted, because that's clearly a necessary step. And that would be the key thing, I think, from my perspective. But it also shows and it reflects, where we are in the world. I mean, when I attend international meetings, you can definitely see the difference in terms of the approach towards coal phase out that you see in Europe compared to other parts of the world where clearly they're still very, very dependent and will be for some time.
Do you have some sympathy for those countries? And India was the main one that said, look, it's unreasonable to expect us to phase out coal. We have to phase down.
I think I understand the challenge that they face, because we in Uniper have a view that this is an evolution, not a revolution, and it does take time. So I can fully understand the nervousness they have. But actually, we're also much further along the technological journey, if you like, for achieving carbon net zero. So from my perspective, we also need to be more ambitious in our goals. I recognise, however, that it's very difficult. It must be very difficult for nation states in the position they're in. They've got populations that are desperately seeking advancement, desperately seeking electricity in a way that we in Europe here would not understand, because we have all of those benefits available to us now, and they don't. So I think we have to understand that the world is not a level playing field.
Yeah. You talked about being on the journey. Uniper is on a journey itself, and evolution. You have decided, you decided some time ago to phase out coal. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if you can tell us where you are with that phase out, and then with the wider evolution of the company.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's probably worth taking a step back and just confirming, what we are. So, we are a power and gas company based in Europe, but also with a global footprint. We've got 35 gigawatts of power in Europe and Russia. And we operate coal-fired power stations, which we're phasing out. I'll come on to that in a moment. Gas-fired power stations, hydro and nuclear. And actually, we're part of the Fortum Uniper group now. So we're actually the third largest carbon-free power producer in Europe with the nuclear and hydro. We made some very strong commitments towards coal phase-out, as you describe it. And actually, if you look at the history of our company, we're hundreds of years old, but actually Uniper itself started in 2016. We had in Europe 44 million tonnes of CO2 emissions in our European fleet in 2016. 2019, we'd reduced that to 22 million. And that was through coal closures. And also, to be fair, we sold a business that we had in France, which had 2 coal-fired power stations. Right. But our preference is always to close if we can. So we got down to 22 million tonnes in 2019. We're aiming for 2030 to be 11 million tonnes in Europe, which would have 1 coal asset left on the grid and the remainder gas assets. And then by 2035, we want to be carbon net zero. And that really shows the transition that we're on, because what we're aiming to do is move to a future where we are using clean gas to support our power generation, or where that's necessary, alongside hydro and nuclear.
So for you, that future energy mix is gas, nuclear, hydro.
And renewables, yeah. So we have two pillars of our growth. We have our renewables and we have clean gas. And of course, they're linked. There's a sector coupling piece here. And I think that's an observation I had from today. We tend to have this polarized view of how this energy transition will occur. It's either electrification or it's gas. And I think that's wrong. It's both. Both of those journeys of decarbonisation are needed if we're going to reach the targets that, for example, the EU set of 2050. So we set ourselves targets in 2035 for our European generation fleet. Early enough that we are challenged by that, because it's not easy to get there, but far enough away that we've got a chance to make the transition. And I think for me now, I'm the COO, but I'm also the CSO, the big challenge that we have at the moment is understanding how can we achieve that transition. For me, it's not a discussion around targets. Yeah, it's a discussion about how we get there and the mechanisms we have, the steering we have to achieve it. And I think that's also what COP was talking about, really. It was trying to move away from just targets to move towards how do we get there, actionable plans, steps that can be taken to achieve that goal. Yeah.
And gas is often talked about a bridging fuel, which kind of a bridge to renewables, which kind of implies that at some point you'll get to the end of that bridge and the bridge will go away. But presumably you see gas being a key part of the energy mix way into the future, because you're talking about the greening of gas.
Yeah, I mean, I think where you can talk about gas as a bridge is certainly natural gas. And there will be a dependency on natural gas in Europe for the coming years. There's no doubt about that. And it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this second amendment that comes from the EU with respect to nuclear and natural gas. But what happens the other side of the bridge for me is this green gas. So it's biomethane, which is happening now and will grow, I believe, and also green hydrogen. But on the way to get to green hydrogen, we have a clear view that any colour of hydrogen is better than grey. I mean, grey hydrogen has such a negative impact from an emissions perspective that anything that we can do in the interim to reduce those emissions has to be a positive step forwards. And so it requires, I think, an agnostic view, if you like, to colour. We have to be colour blind in the short term in order to achieve that goal the other side of the bridge, which is that really, truly decarbonised world that we're seeking.
And to get to that, green hydrogen at the end of the hydrogen rainbow, if you like, what are the key things that need to happen to get there? Because, there's a number of barriers to get to green now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, we need to have the frameworks in place to enable that to happen. We will not be able in Europe, for example, to produce sufficient green hydrogen internally within Europe to generate the hydrogen that's needed. That 50% in Europe would need to be imported. So therefore, if you're going to start importing these sorts of gases, then you need to have a framework in place where you've got confidence around the guarantees of origin, certifications, the liquid market that you would need. And of course, if you can't achieve that, then you've got no confidence in the system. It's very difficult to trade and import those products. So that, I think, is going to become absolutely essential. But then on top of that, this is going to be a major investment in infrastructure. And therefore, we need certainty around things like planning. I think I heard someone today talking about the approach that people want at a European level, but planning is handled locally. So you need, companies like ours need the confidence that the investments they make that could last for 30 years will have their operational permits for that period of time. And it's very important that we find a way of achieving that, such that we balance the needs of society and the stakeholders, but also the needs of those who are investing. And then finally, I think in this transition, just as we've seen in other transitions, like, for example, the development of offshore wind, the market needs some help. And there, I think national governments and the EU can help in that respect by supporting this transition, particularly at the early stages, where green hydrogen will not be priced competitively against grey. If we're going to stimulate that change, we need some help to do that.
And talking of that help, people for years have said about government, so they shouldn't pick winners, but do you think you're at the stage where they now should pick not one winner, but maybe a suite of winners and put some resources and policies behind it?
I think if I had a concern a few years ago, it was that they had picked a winner and it was purely electrification.
Yeah.
And now I sense that actually people are stepping away from that. They realise that there needs to be a mix and there needs to be a balance between molecules and electrons. And from my perspective, that's the right answer. So it's not about backing a single horse at the moment. I think because I think in the end we won't have a single horse. We will still need green hydrogen, for example, to deal with the hard to abate sectors. That won't be solved by electrification alone. So therefore, there needs to be a balance. And I think we're getting to the point where people really, truly appreciate that if you're going to have a successful transition, you need that balance in terms of the approach of delivering it.
Yeah. And if there's one thing that you would like to see, maybe expect to see, but you would really hope to see happen between COP that's just finished and COP next year, one thing in the next year that would leave you heartened at the state of the energy transition, what would it be?
Yeah, I would like to see a discussion at COP which is truly about actions that are being taken. Not about targets, not about something that's in the distance, but steps that are being taken now and evidence of the true commitment. There are parts of the world that are really threatened. I mean, you see that by some of the very powerful speeches that are delivered by nations that are really struggling. And from my perspective, I think that that's what we need to see. We need to start seeing action at the COP rather than discussions around targets.
Yeah. Let's see if we see it then.
Indeed,
let's come back
so.
in a year's time and have this discussion.
I'd be delighted to, yes.
David, it's been great. Love, thanks very much for talking to me today.
Thank you, Kelvin. Thanks for your time.
Cheers. All the best.